200. Look who's with me. The better part of the Walsh dynasty. Alrighty. So this is Julia, who's got a law degree, who's also a professor at USC. So we're going to continue on our mission today. I like to split up the lectures. I know it's overwhelming, so I didn't give these lectures back to back. So we're going to go into our weekly assignments right here. Okay. Just like always, and again, congratulations! Look how much you guys have already accomplished. It's amazing. So we talked about some of the theories of the biology of aging last time, and they totally apply to the disease processes that we're going to review: cancer, diabetes, and heart disease that's associated with diabetes. Okay. Alrighty. So I'm going to go launch right into cancer right here. Okay. Again, my video is going to be inserted right here. All right, and Julie's going to talk a little bit about her journey. It's it's very personal. The lecture on cancer, the journey on cancer. The statistics are a little mind-boggling when you think about it. It varies in terms of what's reported, but 1 out of every 2 to 1 out of every 3 people will get cancer in their lifetime. And so, you look at a class of 60, it means half of you roughly will deal with cancer. Personally, you'll have it, or a lot more of you on the caregiving side will be dealing with somebody that has cancer. Okay. Alrighty. So as I scroll down through here, we have provided the most important statistics. Okay. So Julia did all this right here. These are rates of cancers for different age groups, genders, things like that. And she's going to talk a little bit about the databases. There's the SEER database you see right here that the data was obtained from. And then she highlighted it with some really impactful figures that, again, go over the most common cancers that you can see, men and women. We also have some readouts down here in terms of things that are going well, things that are going poorly. So down here you see we're reducing the rates. Up here the rates are increasing. And this is something that you'll have open again when you're doing the quizzes, okay? Men and women death rates, and then we also get down in here, we start looking at ethnicities. In particular, we're just focusing on Black population versus white populations. And a lot of it rings clear with what's going on in terms of access to healthcare that we've been hearing about a lot lately. Anyways, I wanted to go through all that. Now, if we go back to the very top, I know that was kind of dizzying. We see right here that we really want you to show some curiosity. And so that's why we have the link directly to the www.cancer.gov website. And if you click on this, there's so much to learn from in here. And, definitely the key elements about the basics of cancer can be found in this area right here. Okay. This talks about research and training and fighting cancer. And Julia will talk about a clinical trial that she was on that was funded by a combination of the federal government and private industry. And then you can look at the most common individual cancers in here that might be impacting you or have impacted maybe a member of your family. Okay. So the basic drill is you just go in here, you click on this, and it says, "What is cancer?" Okay. So it takes you to the page, and just read this very like you're reading an online news story. Don't get so caught up in the details, uh, and um, and just try and get to the basics of what's going on. Okay. In when they start talking about cancer and tumors and malignancies, there's definitions. You can have a tumor that is not malignant, it's not cancerous. Okay. You can have one that is malignant. When they get into the discussion, they describe the different forms of cancers, the leukemias. As you scroll down here, they start talking about um, the drivers of cancer. So what cancer is, of course, it's a tumor. It gets huge. There are 2 principles that we're going to go over later in class. One principle is you get these mutations, and it all comes down to the DNA. You can get a mutation in your DNA from exposure to environmental toxins. You can get a mutation in your DNA that is completely random, especially what happens with like the blood cancers, because the blood cancer cells are always dividing, and the DNA goes like this and when it divides, it causes a mutation. There are virally derived cancers. So You can get a cancer from HIV indirectly. You can get cancer from hepatitis. So and of course, HPV is the one that you should be all aware of and have your vaccinations against, so you don't get throat cancer or um, help me with the female cancer,
Cervical cancer.
cervical cancer. I don't have a cervix, so it's like it doesn't even exist. Okay. All right. Anyways, so and then so these that's one form, and then they talk about the other thing that happens with cancers is we are always turning over ourselves and getting rid of the bad ones. It's a process called apoptosis, and cancer is very nefarious. It also will eliminate our ability to get rid of the bad ones, and so the bad ones develop more and more and more mutations, which makes the cancer stronger and stronger. So you have two things: you have a gas pedal and a brake that is normally, highly regulated in your cells. And in cancer, both the gas pedal of making new cells goes out of control from mutations, and then the brakes, which is the elimination of cells, that it gets screwed up and down regulated or eliminated because of its own mutations. All right, so that's the background. And then as you scroll down here, it talks about carcinomas. The most common one, it's the tissue that lines all your organs. Um, Sarcoma is really rare but really aggressive, found in muscles and fat and tendons and ligaments. The kind of cancer that Julie has, it's your white blood cells that are produced in your bone marrow. A lymphoma, which is a variant of that. You can have lymphoma and leukemia depending on where the white blood cells are, and on and on. Okay, so I just wanted to give you all that background. Again, the best thing you can do is just show some curiosity. I'm going to go backwards in the browser and go through all this. The clinical trial aspect is really important because this is how you get the best medicine, and you do this by going to one of the largest medical centers in your particular neighborhood. Alrighty. Um, I'm almost done here, Julie. She's waiting. And then it's just like I said, she'll talk about her experience, she'll talk about clinical trial, talk about the data and how it's accumulated. And then at the very end, we get down here. Watch these videos, they're very informative. This video right here, this goes over the concept again of the gas pedal and the brakes that I was just talking about. And don't forget to open your quiz. Just open your quiz and take it at the same time. And then we'll talk right here about, sadly, it is a continuum with diseases like cancer, but it's not cancer alone. It's dealing with death and dying. And so this was an appropriate place to put this. And you can go through the stages of grief for a lot of reasons. You can have a really, really shitty breakup, which we've never had, but you can. You can have that, and it'll make you feel terrible, and you go through it. You can have a loss of a job. You can have loss of a friend, loss of a family member. All right, I think I've talked enough, and now I'm gonna let Julie talk.
Okay. So John usually does the videos, but sometimes we have subjects that I have a passion for and background and experience for, and so I ask him if I can hop in. Before I went to law school, I was a cancer researcher, and I'm also a cancer patient. So kind of an interesting little story. I was working on growth factors in a laboratory in the 90s, and now as a cancer patient, I use those growth factors when I become neutropenic or have low neutrophil levels in my blood. So you never know. You might be doing work now as a student or as a new graduate from college, and it may benefit you or your family down the line. So life comes full circle a lot. So one of the things I like to tell people, I do a lot of work with cancer patients, educating them and advocating for them around the world. One of the things I like to tell new cancer patients is be careful when you go on the internet and look at the statistics. So even though we're asking you, we're giving you all of these statistics, know that the statistics are constantly changing. So we do a look back, and usually it's a few years out of date, and it doesn't reflect new treatments, new discoveries that are happening very rapidly in the field of cancer research right now. I got a really good question from a student this week who said, why is it on one of the quiz questions that it says, this is the right answer for a certain type of cancer, but I found this chart that showed a different answer. And the reason is it can depend on which of the data registries the data is pulled from. So if you go onto the the National Cancer Institute website, you can see the SEER, SEER data registries. There's a bunch of different ones. And so you'll get slightly different answers depending on where you pull the data and when you pull the data. So year to year, it's going to change, and our trends change a little bit every year. So we get this report that's published by the National Cancer Institute every year, the annual report to the nation that talks about cancer statistics and what's going on in cancer statistics. So just understand, if you or a loved one is diagnosed with cancer and you go and you look at the cancer statistics, you may become very sad, but that doesn't mean that's what the answer is right now. That doesn't mean that that's what your treatment right now will give you. And of course, our dog is moaning in the background. So the annual report on the status of cancer is very, very interesting. We always advocate for funding for the National Cancer Institute because we're all going to be impacted by cancer in our lifetime. So it is important to keep putting money into that. Is it the dog? That's her dog. She's old, and she actually was diagnosed with cancer last year. A type of sarcoma. It was early on and hadn't metastasized, so we had surgery, and she didn't need any other treatment, and she's doing pretty well. So when you're looking at the cancer statistics, we talk about incidence and we talk about mortality. It's typically looked at as the number per 100,000 people in the population. So just remember that. That's on the Blackboard site. Things change because of new treatments. We have incredible new treatments for melanoma, for lung cancer. There's so many advances in the field of leukemia and blood cancers that I'm benefiting from. So lung cancer, my aunt passed away from lung cancer about 15 years ago. Didn't have many great options. The life expectancy was maybe 2 months after diagnosis when she was diagnosed. And now we have these great checkpoint inhibitors that are really making a difference. So we're seeing improvements in survival.
Yeah, the old drugs, just basically what we had three approaches. We had surgery, we had radiation, we had chemo and chemotherapy. Which when you take chemotherapy, it targets any cell in your body that's dividing, so you get pretty sick from it. It targets the cancer cells that are dividing the most quickly, but it targets the other cells. But what Julie's talking about, and the clinical trial she was on, were drugs that were a lot more specific, going after mostly the cancer drugs.
Targeted inhibitors.
Targeted.
So I was able to benefit from another new technology that many cancer patients are taking advantage of now, which is personalized medicine, where your cancer cells are sequenced, and by looking at the DNA sequence, we find what mutations you have, what drugs will work, what drugs won't work. So when they sequenced my cancer cells, they found out that I was not going to respond to chemotherapy. So it was a good thing to know. I didn't want to have to waste my time having chemo, dealing with the problems and the side effects of chemo, and then not get a good result. So I was able to go into a clinical trial, get newer drugs that were targeted, that worked very, very well, and put me into a pretty decent remission right now. So one of the things I want to talk about that I'm personally passionate about is HPV. So after I was diagnosed with cancer, I said, hey, if I could give someone a shot and they would not have cancer and not have to go through what I'm going through, that seems like a pretty good deal. Australia right now is making the HPV vaccine very readily available, and it looks like their numbers of cancers related to HPV, which isn't just cervical cancer, it's penis cancer, it's vaginal cancer, it's throat cancer, it's anal cancer. So if you can get a shot and not get one of those cancers, that's a pretty good deal. Australia is seeing rapid declines in their cancer rates of those cancers because they're making the HPV vaccine readily available. So just a little commercial. So
and you guys are you're high risk right now, so why not?
My boys have had the shots. Interestingly enough, when my older son had it, it was just because I said, hey, if you can keep a woman from getting cancer, that's great. And then as more data came out, we found out, okay, these are cancers that affect men as well. It's not just
I have a real good friend who's a professor that got it. That's not cancer.
And
it is what it is.
We have 2 nieces right now that have in their 20s cervical cancer. So it's a good thing. So anyway, when we look at, go back to the Blackboard website. So When we look at the cancer death rates, they have been stable or declining. Some cancers related to obesity and lifestyle factors like lack of physical activity have been increasing. So liver cancer, if you drink, breast cancer or colon cancer, these things are becoming more common among younger people as opposed to, most of the time cancer is a diagnosis of older people. We look at hepatitis B and C infection rates. Those infections cause liver cancer. So these are things that we look at. If you look at the deadliest cancer types for men and women, it's colorectal, lung, brain for men, breast, lung, colorectal for women. So basically, we're seeing some overlap there. Early diagnosis is really important. Preventive cancer measures like getting colonoscopies, getting mammograms, doing self exams, very, very important on those things. So scroll down. So we're seeing big drops in the cancer death rates for melanoma because of these checkpoint inhibitors like PD-1. We're seeing
So the one that you hear on advertisement most is a company called Keytruda, and yeah, it's changed everything.
Yeah, and when we look at the most common cancer types for younger people, younger adults, 20 to 49, it's colorectal, testicular melanoma, breast, thyroid melanoma. So those are things that, at least in terms of testicular cancer and breast cancer, do a self-exam. If something looks weird, go to the doctor. You have control over early diagnosis and early detection. So John talked a little bit about the trends in cancer death rates. We see increases, which are the red bars. We see decreases, which are the blue bars. So again, we're seeing these cancers like liver cancer that might be related to lifestyle. So scroll down a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And when you like Julie mentioned incidence, I always talk incidence is like the prefix in means increase, so it's increase in the number of cases. Whereas prevalence is if we took a slice of all the world and said, okay, how many people have this cancer at this moment in time, versus an incidence is looking at increases.
Yeah. So scroll down a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Keep going. Keep going. So 5-year survival rates for cancers among children. Children tend to get more acute cancers. They're, in a weird way, these acute cancers that are aggressive are treatable because the cancer cells are dividing rapidly. So the drugs that we have can focus on those rapidly dividing cells. So we do have some good news about survival rates of cancer among children. And the news has gotten better since then because we have newer treatments like CAR T, where we kind of weaponize your own T cells against the cancer. So we've got some new treatments that are helping those younger cancer patients with acute leukemias. So
T cells are your immune system cells. It's a trip. So you actually take your own immune system cells and like Julie said, you weaponize them, you give them special bullets.
So here's something I want to talk about. I have a passion for cancer patients who do not have access to good care. So people who live in rural areas, people who don't live close to a major cancer center, people who don't have money to spend on their treatment, people who don't have good insurance, people who are just uncomfortable accessing the medical system. There's a million different reasons why we see differences in survival rates. It's not that, white people have better genes than black people. There are a million different factors that go into the differences in survival between white patients and black patients that have the same cancer. So melanoma, uterine cancer, bladder cancer, cervical cancer, oral cavity cancer, a lot of these are related to access to healthcare, getting early detection, et cetera. So we do see some pretty pronounced differences by race. I think they're getting smaller as time goes on, but we do have in gerontology we have a professor called Reginald Tucker Seeley who researches this particular issue. So
he's awesome. You should go visit him sometime.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. There's a lot of work to be done there. So again, if we look at mortality, you can see there's differences in mortality based on race and ethnicity. Broken down white, black, Asian Pacific Islander, American Indian, Alaskan Native, or Hispanic.
You see the death rates here, you see the black population, and this is, adjusted to, so it's the same number of people, so it's on a percentile basis, they fare worse, and it's because of limited access to healthcare. So you show up and the cancer has progressed to a point that it's more difficult to treat. If you just got in there earlier, these problems wouldn't have happened. Okay, and again, you see this across the board here. And you see how dramatic the prostate cancer record is right here. And part of it is the gender thing. Men don't go see doctors on a routine basis the way women do. And and men, especially down here in this area, don't want to admit to it. So it's an issue. So
Absolutely. So we are seeing improvements in 5-year survival rates. We will continue to see improvements in 5-year survival rates. That's 1975 to 2012. In cancer research terms, 8 years ago is like we were in the Stone Age. We hadn't really unpacked the biology of cancer cells. We didn't have these tools where we could readily sequence the DNA of cancer cells like we have now. So we have made big advances since the data for this chart was developed. So.
Like Julie said, she had a targeted inhibitor that went after one of the mutations that she had in her cells. And then also she was infused with antibodies that only touched her lymphoma cells, only touched her lymphatic cells. There was a little bit of side effects, but it didn't touch lung cells. It didn't touch brain cells. It only went after the lymphatic cells.
Yeah. So, and then scroll down. The video is really great. It's 12 minutes. It starts a little slow, and then it starts to get into some really good information about just walking you through cancer biology. So definitely watch the video. It will help you with the quiz. And then every year people have trouble with this concept of proto-oncogenes versus oncogenes, tumor suppressor genes, etc. So you have a normal gene that's called a proto-oncogene. It gets mutated in a cancer cell and becomes an oncogene. So that's putting the gas, feeding the cells to make them grow and divide in an uncontrolled way to beat cancer.
And they call them proto-oncogenes. It's really not. It's like it makes it sound scary, and it shouldn't be called that. It's just a growth gene. You slough off new skin cells all day long. And you replace it with old skin cells, and you replace it with new skin cell. Your gastrointestinal system about every 30 seconds is making a new cell and getting rid of the old cells. Including your colon down there. And so we have these growth genes called, like I said, they're proto-oncogenes. Their normal job is to make new cells. They become an oncogene, and when instead of making a new cell every 30 seconds or a new cell every 5 minutes, they're making new cells every second. Okay, so that means there's too much gas. Okay.
So the tumor suppressor genes, one of the things that we know, for example, elephants live about the same lifespan as humans. They're much, much larger, so they have billions and trillions of cells. They don't get cancer. Why don't they get cancer? Because elephants have unmutated, activated tumor suppressor genes, one called TP53, which is very common in cancer patients.
It's the most common mutation in all of human
cancer. So they have the wild type, the normal unmutated type of TP53. They have 40 copies of it. Now humans only have 2. So if I am a human and I have 2 TP53 genes and one of them gets mutated, then my cancer is going to become a lot more aggressive.
Yeah. And again, the job of this thing, this type of gene, this tumor suppressor gene, they call it the brakes. This is the one that if you have a cell that's not looking right, it basically tells the cell, okay, you're done. We're going to make you commit suicide and get rid of you before you became even more of a problem. All right. And so this is ongoing all the time, making new cells and getting rid of the bad ones. Elephants are well structured, and for us, not so much. Okay.
Right. And so that's pretty much everything for cancer. I want to give a shout out for clinical trials. There's a misperception about clinical trials that you're going to get a clinical trial drug that's incredibly dangerous and has horrible side effects versus like a placebo non-treatment. That's never going to happen. In a cancer clinical trial, you are going to get standard of care versus the next generation drug. And quite often, you've already had a phase 1 clinical trial that has tested doses of the drug. So we know that it's safe and tolerable. And before I went into my clinical trial, I researched, and it's all out there on the internet, I researched going through the American Society of Hematology, what was the data that was present for my clinical trial for those 2 drugs? What were the side effects? And we didn't know. It was a roll of the dice in terms of how bad the side effects are going to be. But my trial was very tolerable. You get treated like a rock star. The drugs hand delivered to you. The doctor comes to you in the infusion center to do the exams. They there's a person, a clinical trial coordinator that makes all of your appointments. They make it very, very easy, and they watch you very, very carefully. So I call it, it's like concierge medicine. It's like rock star, suddenly I'm a celebrity getting treated so well at my treatment center because I'm in a clinical trial and they want me to do well.
And clinical
So,
trials vary. So in her case, all the patients, there were 36, all of them got the new drugs, and then they just compared them to the history of patients that preceded her.
and
That
they
it,
watch side effects. They
you know,
were logging kind of what happens with
so
these new drugs.
sometimes sometimes it's not your either or. Sometimes you're going to get the new drug, and just a side note on this is the drug company financed a big part of it. Of course, our insurance company helped finance, and it goes towards disparity of healthcare, whether or not you have good health insurance. I always like to bring this up. The very first year of her clinical trial, the approximate cost of everything was $300,000. $300,000. Um, and this is why the Affordable Care Act was so important, so important. And I'm going to send out a video later on where President Obama talks about Julie with respect to the Affordable Care Act and why it was so important. Because, you go, you do a couple of years of clinical trial and you basically have blown through your insurance and now it's out of pocket, but no more as long as the Affordable Care Act is still in place.
So on the Obama story, and John will send it out later. Um, I'm one of these people that when I get riled up about something, I send an email. So just so we can all still believe in democracy, and I know we're going through hard times right now, I send an email to the White House. There's 330 million people in the US. The President of the United States read my email and used my email in a speech because I was talking about a cancer patient and the challenges I was having with, worrying about the financial impact of my treatment. So anyway,
was awesome. And
write emails.
he didn't change a word of it, which
Yeah.
was awesome because he's really.
So let's go down to death and dying.
Right.
Another subject I am passionate about. Grieving and loss applies to all of us. You may not have a close relative or a friend or whatever who has died, but you've had loss in your life. And sometimes it's loss in a good way, but you can still feel sad about it. When you go from high school to college, you lost that comfortable place that you were in where you knew who you were in high school. And now you're kind of starting over again in college. There's a little bit of loss there. If you didn't get the job you wanted or the internship you wanted, there's loss. If you break up with a friend or a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a partner of some sort, there's loss. But
for those of you that are graduating, you didn't get to walk. You were just like, spring break, bye, don't come back. I'm sure you went through a little bit of remorse and loss on that too.
A lot of people that were seniors this year, whether they were athletes who didn't get to finish their season as a senior, or they were in the Greek life and didn't get to kind of finish out the year with their fraternity or sorority, there was a lot of feeling of loss surrounding the impact of COVID-19. But we're giving you kind of classic. Doc is so insane, but we love her. Anyway, so we're giving you kind of the classic literature surrounding grief and loss, the 5 stages, denial, anger, bargaining, despair, acceptance. There's a lot of different ways to think about grief. So if you watch these videos and if you learn about Kubler-Ross's concept of the 5 stages of grief and it doesn't resonate with you, that's okay. There's plenty of other stuff out there that you can think about. I look at a website called whatsyourgrief.com that has great information about grief. And it's important to recognize there's 5 stages of grief. It's not super clean. You can hop from stage 1 to stage 3 to stage 2 to stage 4 to stage 5 and then start back over again. My mother passed away suddenly in November of 2018. I'm still going through the grieving process. We were really close. We were, best friends, and I really looked up to her. And she was the person I would call when something was, important happened, or if I had a question about something. She was the first person I would think of to call. And that grieving process takes time. So be kind to yourselves if you're grieving something. Be aware that everybody grieves differently. So if you and your friend both experience a loss, you may not all approach it the same way. But certainly there's a lot that we can learn about grief and understanding the process so that as things happen to us, Don't be afraid to wrestle with your feelings. Let them happen and experience it. And, the more grief you feel, it's because you cared so much and you loved the person so much. So it's okay to feel grief, and be kind to yourself when that happens. So, do you have anything?
No, she's awesome.
Okay. All right. Fight on,
All
guys.
right, right on. All right, guys. So I'm gonna go over here to my magic box of tricks here, and I'm going to say goodbye. Bye.